Under the yellow haze of neon, the River's Edge bar pulsed with its usual Friday night rhythm. Glasses clinking, laughter spilling too loud, a jukebox fighting to be heard over the crowd. Behind the counter, Janelle Rivers moved with the quiet authority of someone who had built this place with her own hands. To the regulars, she was just the owner, the woman who kept the drinks cold and the lights warm. To the officers who pushed open the door that night, she was something else entirely, an easy target. They didn't come for the beer. They came for the show of power. Two men in uniform, off-duty but swollen with arrogance, swaggered past the tables like they owned the air itself. Small-town authority unchecked. Their eyes found Janelle, and in the way they leaned on the bar you could smell trouble coming. One officer muttered something crude, loud enough for the nearest tables to stiffen. Janelle ignored it, her hands steady on the glass she polished, her eyes refusing to rise. But silence to certain men is gasoline. Within moments their voices carried, their laughter sharpened, their words slicing through the hum of the room. It wasn't about law, not about order, it was about humiliation. The bar shifted. Customers avoided eye contact. Phones lit under tables as some began to record. The music thinned into background static, drowned beneath the mounting cruelty. Then, like a blade tearing canvas, it happened. One officer reached across the counter, grabbed the fabric of Janelle's shirt, and ripped it down the seam. The sound, sharp, deliberate, cut the air in half. Gasps burst from the crowd. A woman at the end of the bar dropped her drink. Glass scattered across the floor. A man cursed under his breath, too afraid to rise. And Janelle, still upright, still silent, stood exposed before them all. But humiliation wasn't what they uncovered. Beneath the torn cloth, etched in bold black ink against her skin, was a mark that needed no introduction. An eagle, a globe, an anchor. The unmistakable insignia of the United States Marine Corps. The kind of tattoo that speaks of battles fought, oaths taken, sacrifices carried in silence. For those who knew, it was more than a design. It was a declaration. The room collapsed into silence. Not peace, but shock. Not calm, but the recognition of a line crossed too far. The officer's grin faltered. His hand froze in midair as if the ink itself had stopped him cold. Around the bar, eyes widened, some with awe, some with fear, others with shame for not standing sooner. Phones rose higher now, recording not just misconduct but revelation. In that moment, under flickering neon and broken fabric, the truth pressed heavy on every chest in the room. This was not just a bar owner. This was a Marine. And the arrogance that had filled the air seconds earlier was gone, replaced by something far sharper, respect mixed with fear. The neon flickered once, and then the whispers began. Every head turned toward the counter where Janelle Rivers stood, her shirt torn, her Marine Corps tattoo visible like a banner of truth in the dim light. The silence that had followed the ripping sound was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that weighs heavy, thick with realization. Yet silence never holds for long. The two officers, drunk on their own power, tried to laugh it off. "It's just ink," one sneered, though the edge in his voice betrayed him. The second shifted uneasily, recognizing that the crowd no longer saw them as men in control, but as predators caught in the act. For Janelle, the moment burned slow. She had built this bar to escape the battlefield, to craft a corner of peace in a town where respect had to be earned drink by drink. Few knew her story. Fewer dared to ask. She never boasted, never spoke of deployments, never mentioned the sand and smoke of places far away. But the tattoo told the truth. To Marines, it was a code, a lifelong bond that carried the weight of sacrifice. To everyone else in the bar, it was proof they had just witnessed a grave act of police misconduct. Phones rose higher, lenses catching every twitch of the officers' faces, every line of the ink against Janelle's skin. Online, Those recordings would not be forgotten. The officers had miscalculated. They believed this was just another night of intimidation, another easy mark. They had not counted on the viral power of a single clip showing racial profiling, abuse of authority, and the humiliation of a woman who carried the eagle, globe, and anchor on her body. Every patron knew what they were seeing was bigger than a bar fight. It was a justice story unfolding in real time, one that would travel beyond these four walls. Janelle's eyes, calm but unflinching, locked onto the man who had torn her shirt. He faltered, but pride forced his jaw tight. He leaned in close enough for the cameras to hear. "Nobody cares about your tattoo. You're nobody here." His words landed with a thud, hollow and desperate. A veteran at the back of the bar slammed his glass down, the sound sharp as gunfire. "That tattoo means she stood where you never would," he said, his voice shaking the quiet. The crowd stirred, a ripple of unease running through the room. Suddenly, the officers were no longer predators. They were prey trapped in the circle of witnesses. Janelle still hadn't spoken. Her silence carried more weight than shouting could. She turned back to the counter, steady hands pouring a drink, as if refusing to give them the satisfaction of fear. That composure only deepened the sense of control slipping from the men who thought they held it. Around the room, tension thickened. This wasn't just a matter of dignity. It was about accountability. And accountability, once awakened, doesn't sleep again. The younger officer reached for his phone, muttering about calling backup. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the stakes rising. Patrons whispered words like police brutality and civil rights violation. Someone said it louder, letting it hang in the air. Each word became a nail sealing the officer's fate. What they had thought would vanish into another forgotten night was already beginning to echo beyond the bar. Janelle's tattoo had turned the story, and now it belonged to the public. She finally raised her head, voice low but razor sharp. "You thought I was just a bar owner. You were wrong." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even loud, but the bar seemed to exhale at once. Every camera caught the words. Every listener felt the weight of truth sharpened by years of silence. This wasn't a woman who needed to shout. She was a Marine who had already lived through worse than arrogance in uniform. The officers exchanged looks, realization dawning too late. They had not humiliated a woman. They had humiliated the Marine Corps, a name heavier than any badge they wore. And with every second ticking, the crowd's loyalty shifted further away from authority and toward the woman who stood calm, unshaken, a symbol of resilience carved in ink. The younger officer's thumb hovered over his phone as if dialing backup might restore the authority that had drained from the room, but every second he hesitated only exposed how fragile his control had become. A murmur ran through the bar. Disbelief, anger, the kind that grows when injustice is not just witnessed, but shared. Patrons leaned forward, their faces lit by phone screens as comments began to flood in from the live stream. "Police accountability now. She's a Marine. Show respect. This is racial profiling on camera." The digital echo gave the crowd courage. Injustice was no longer hidden. It was broadcast. Janelle moved slowly, deliberately, wiping down the counter as though the officers weren't there. Her calm defiance magnified the spectacle. Every subtle gesture told the room she wasn't rattled. That composure enraged the older officer, the one who had ripped her shirt. He slammed his fist on the bar, making bottles rattle against the mirrored shelf. "You think that tattoo makes you untouchable?" he barked. His words bounced back at him, hollow, the crowd no longer intimidated. A man near the jukebox muttered, "That tattoo means she earned what you never could." More voices joined, low at first, then louder. The balance of power tilted further. People who had shrunk back minutes ago now stood taller. Some angled their phones openly, no longer pretending to hide. The live stream climbed in viewers, hundreds, then thousands, each comment sharpening the pressure. "Justice story unfolding live," one wrote. These cops crossed the line. Janelle finally lifted her gaze, eyes fixed on the man who had tried to strip her dignity. Her voice was even, but each word struck with precision. I served this country. I protected people who couldn't protect themselves. And tonight, you tried to strip that away. The silence afterward was not emptiness. It was judgment. Her words were recorded, carried beyond the bar, already forming the spine of a headline. The officer sneered, but his posture faltered. He knew the truth. The room no longer belonged to him. Yet arrogance dies hard. "You're nothing here," he spat, gesturing to his badge. "This says who runs this town." He underestimated the weight of history inked on her skin. For veterans in the crowd, the eagle, globe, and anchor was not decoration. It was a blood oath. A grizzled man at the back raised his sleeve, revealing his own faded Marine Corps tattoo. His voice cut through the tension. "That mark means family. And if you touch her again, you answer to all of us." The bar erupted, not in chaos, but in solidarity. Applause, shouts, the pounding of fists on tables. The tide had turned. Phones kept recording, angles overlapping, capturing every second. The officers were now framed not as enforcers, but as aggressors exposed in real time. Words like civil rights, racial profiling, and abuse of power circulated both in the bar and online, becoming the language of accountability. The live stream scrolled with outrage, veterans typing, "You don't disrespect a Marine." The younger officer lowered his phone, realizing that calling for help might only escalate the humiliation. The older one tried to stand taller, but his eyes betrayed the tremor of fear. Janelle didn't move toward him. She didn't need to. Her stillness, her steady breath, and the ink across her skin did more than any threat could. She had already shifted the ground beneath his feet. For the first time that night, the officers were the ones surrounded. Not by weapons, not by fists, but by the undeniable truth that the room, and the world watching through glowing screens, had already chosen its side. The tension in the river's edge felt alive now, crawling along the walls like static before a storm. The officers had walked in expecting deference, the kind of fearful respect that came easy in small towns. Instead, they found themselves pressed beneath the weight of a crowd that no longer feared them. A woman near the pool table raised her phone higher, her voice steady as she said, "The whole country is watching this." The officers froze, their authority shrinking with every passing second of the live stream. Janelle stood straight behind the bar, her torn shirt exposing the tattoo as clearly as a badge of honor. She did not raise her voice, but when she spoke again, the words carved through the smoky air. "You came here to shame me. Instead, you showed this town what power really looks like when it hides behind a badge." The phrase police misconduct rippled through the crowd, whispered first, then louder, as if naming it gave people permission to see it clearly. The older officer bristled. His hand hovered near his holster, not drawing but close enough to spark panic. Several patrons gasped. For an instant, it felt like the air itself might ignite into violence. A veteran by the dartboard stepped forward, voice booming. "Don't even think about it. That's a Marine you're threatening. You pull that weapon and you'll answer to the law and to us." The crowd swelled behind him, customers who had minutes ago been silent now shouting their defiance. "Accountability!" one man roared. "Respect the Marine Corps!" another echoed. The younger officer tugged at his partner's sleeve, whispering urgently, but the words dissolved under the rising chant. The live stream count surged into the tens of thousands, comments flying faster than they could be read. "This is racial profiling. Civil rights violation live. Protect her." Janelle's eyes never left the man who had ripped her shirt. She leaned forward just enough that only the nearest phones could capture the quiet steel in her voice. "You thought you owned this room, but I built it, and I survived battlefields you'll never have the courage to walk." The line landed heavy, a blow sharper than any fist. The officer staggered back half a step, as though the truth itself had struck him. Then came the breaking point. A figure from the back, an older man with silver hair, sleeves rolled high, stepped into the light. His forearm carried the faded outline of the same eagle, globe, and anchor. The bar hushed as he pointed toward Janelle. She's one of us. Once a Marine, always a Marine, and we don't let our own stand alone. The declaration cracked the room wide open. Applause thundered, chairs scraped, people rose to their feet. It was no longer Janelle versus two officers. It was the community, united against abuse of power. The officers, once smug, now looked cornered. Their attempt at control had collapsed into a justice story larger than themselves. Phones recorded every tremor, every shift in their posture, immortalizing the moment where arrogance met accountability. Janelle remained steady, hands braced on the bar, her presence unshaken. The tattoo on her shoulder seemed to glow under the neon, not just ink but proof, an unspoken testimony stronger than any badge. She had not asked to be revealed, but the truth had risen anyway, and now it would not be silenced. The stage was set. The bar no longer felt like a place of leisure, but an arena, every eye waiting, every camera aimed, the next moment poised to decide whether the night ended in collapse or in reckoning. The River's Edge bar seemed to shrink into a single heartbeat, every sound swallowed by the weight of what had just happened. Janelle Rivers stood behind her counter, her Marine Corps tattoo revealed beneath torn fabric, and the room became a stage where no one dared blink. The two officers had swaggered in expecting obedience, but now their faces betrayed something else, fear creeping in behind the arrogance they clung to. One tried to smirk, forcing a laugh that cracked in his throat. "It's just ink," he muttered, hoping dismissal would erase the gravity of what everyone saw. But the crowd wasn't buying it. A voice rose from the back, gravelly and certain. "That's the eagle, globe, and anchor. That's not just ink. That's sacrifice." The words rippled through the room like a shockwave, and the silence broke into murmurs, then into angry declarations. Phones hovered higher, red recording lights fixed on the officers who now looked less like protectors and more like predators exposed. The older officer slammed his fist on the bar, bottles rattling, his temper spilling over. "You think that tattoo makes you untouchable?" he barked. The question hung limp in the air, suffocated by the weight of disbelief pressing in from every side. Janelle didn't flinch, her eyes, calm and unyielding, locked on him as if she had already measured the limits of his power. "You didn't just disrespect me," she said, voice low but cutting. "You disrespected the Marine Corps, and the whole world is watching." Phones caught every syllable, live stream comments exploding with outrage, police misconduct, racial profiling, civil rights violation. The terms became weapons in the hands of strangers who now held the story far beyond this bar. The younger officer shifted nervously, his hand brushing the holster at his side, and the crowd gasped. Dozens of cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment when escalation felt seconds away. A man near the dartboard shouted, "Don't you dare! You pull that weapon and you'll answer for it." The tension climbed to a fever pitch, the bar vibrating with the knowledge that one wrong move could turn a viral clip into tragedy. Yet Janelle remained steady, her presence holding the room in balance. She leaned forward on the counter, voice steady as iron. "You came in here thinking you could strip me of dignity, but dignity isn't yours to take." Then from the crowd, an older man stepped forward, his sleeve rolled high to reveal a faded Marine tattoo of his own. He raised his arm so all could see. "She's one of us," he declared, voice carrying like a gavel striking wood. "Once a Marine, always a Marine." The bar erupted, cheers, shouts, fists pounding on tables. The officers' bravado cracked, their eyes darting from phone to phone, realizing they were no longer feared but judged. Janelle's chin lifted, her words slicing through the roar. "You ripped my shirt, but you tore your own badge apart." The statement landed with finality, and the crowd seized it like a verdict, chanting for accountability. At that moment, a younger man rose from near the door, his uniform unmistakable even in the dim light. An active-duty Marine, home on leave, his voice carried the weight of authority. He pointed to Janelle's tattoo, speaking with precision. "That emblem is not a decoration. Look close. Those numbers beneath it mark her unit. That's authentic. That's earned." Gasps spread like wildfire. Phones trembled as they captured the revelation. The officers, pale and sweating, had nowhere left to stand. The crowd surged with shouts of respect, justice, Marine Corps pride. The live stream climbed into the hundreds of thousands, the hashtag #HatMarineBarOwner flooding screens nationwide. Janelle didn't raise her hands in triumph, didn't smile. She only stood taller, the tattoo gleaming under neon light as if ink itself had become a torch. Her calm defiance was louder than any scream, her stillness more powerful than any weapon. And in that moment, under the judgment of her community and the gaze of a nation watching through their screens, the officers realized they had not only lost control of a bar, they had lost everything that made their authority real. The roar inside the river's edge spilled beyond its walls, carried by every phone in the room. The live stream that had begun as a shaky video of two arrogant cops now surged into a tidal wave, comments flashing faster than anyone could read. Police misconduct caught live, racial profiling on camera, Marine Corps veteran humiliated. The story was no longer contained. It was burning across the internet in real time. Outside the bar, cars slowed as people watched through their windshields, drawn by the noise and the glow of screens. Within minutes, locals who had seen the footage online began gathering at the entrance, their faces lit by headlights and phones. The officers glanced toward the door, realizing escape meant pushing through a crowd that was no longer on their side. Janelle Rivers stood like a pillar behind her bar, her torn shirt forgotten, her tattoo displayed for all to see. She did not shout. She didn't need to. The room spoke for her, voices rising in defense of her dignity, in outrage at the abuse of authority. A man near the jukebox turned his phone outward so the cops could see the numbers rolling in. 20,000 people are watching. 30. It's climbing by the second. The officers stiffened, their arrogance now hollow armor cracking with every notification sound. Then came the first knock against the door, a heavy thud that drew every head. The door swung open, and in walked three older men in worn jackets, each bearing the unmistakable stance of military service. One raised a hand in salute toward Janelle. "We saw the stream," he said simply. "We don't let Marines stand alone." The crowd erupted, the chant of once a Marine, always a Marine swelling until it shook the bottles on the shelves. The officers paled, realizing they were no longer facing a bar full of strangers, but a brotherhood called into action. The younger officer whispered urgently, "We should go." But the older one clung to pride, muttering about control, about being the law. His words dissolved under the weight of new voices. More veterans poured in, their sleeves rolled up, their tattoos displayed like banners. One man pointed at Janelle's shoulder and said, "That's the real mark. Anyone who served knows it." Another added, "You disgraced the Corps tonight. That doesn't wash off." Phones captured every moment, the live stream counter pushing past 100,000. Janelle leaned forward on the bar, her tone steady as steel. "You wanted to prove power by tearing me down. Instead, you proved who you are in front of the whole country." The statement landed like a gavel, and the crowd cheered it as if it were verdict and sentence at once. The officers shifted, their shoulders sagging under the weight of shame. The viral storm outside grew louder. Media vans screeched to a halt on the street, reporters spilling out with cameras. Flashbulbs lit the windows, adding urgency to a night already carved into memory. Commentators online wrote headlines in real time. Marine bar owner exposes police misconduct. Racial profiling sparks outrage in small-town bar. The story had transcended walls and become national. The younger officer dropped his gaze, muttering apologies under his breath, but it was too late. The live stream demanded more than quiet retreat. The crowd shouted, "Say it! Say it to her face!" And for the first time that night, the men who had entered like predators now trembled before the judgment of a community empowered by truth. Janelle's expression didn't change. Calm, unshaken, she let the silence stretch until every camera tilted closer. Then she spoke. "You can leave now. But remember, what you did tonight won't be erased. It's evidence, it's history, and it will follow you." The words carried like a sentence stamped into stone. The officers backed toward the door, swallowed by the crush of veterans and townspeople who had gathered outside. Their exit wasn't victory. It was retreat under a hail of chants for accountability and justice. As they disappeared into the night, the bar shook with applause, not for a fight won, but for dignity defended. And still the numbers on the live stream climbed. Veterans across the country posted in solidarity, sharing their own tattoos, their own scars, each image adding to the firestorm. Civil rights groups picked it up within the hour, framing it not just as a barroom humiliation, but as a clear case of systemic abuse, racial profiling, and the unshakable pride of the Marine Corps. What began as cruelty in a corner of a bar had become a lesson broadcast to millions. Dignity inked in sacrifice can never be torn away. Janelle remained behind her counter, her hands steady, her eyes fixed forward. The bar was hers again, reclaimed not by shouting but by truth revealed. And as the noise faded into the hum of voices, she whispered to herself words only the nearest microphone caught. "They thought I was just a bar owner. But once a Marine, always a Marine." The night ended, but its echoes did not. By morning, the River's Edge bar was no longer just a local watering hole. It was a headline. News anchors replayed the grainy footage of torn fabric, the flash of the Marine Corps tattoo, the stunned silence that followed. Commentators spoke of police misconduct, racial profiling, and the unexpected power of a justice story unfolding in real time. The hashtag #MarineBarOwner trended across every platform, each post amplifying the truth that what happened in a small-town bar had become a national reckoning. For Janelle Rivers, the dawn was quiet. She swept broken glass from the floor, reset overturned chairs, and restored her bar with the steady patience of someone who had seen chaos before. The neon signs still flickered, the jukebox still hummed, yet the room felt changed, charged with the weight of what had been revealed. She paused at the mirror behind the counter, catching her own reflection. The torn shirt was gone, replaced by a clean one, but the tattoo on her shoulder gleamed beneath the fabric as if memory itself had burned it brighter. She touched it lightly, remembering the faces of those she had served beside, the ones who never came home. She hadn't sought recognition. She hadn't wanted her past dragged into the spotlight. But the truth had surfaced anyway, and in doing so, it had protected not just her dignity, but the principle that respect cannot be stripped by arrogance. A Marine's oath was lifelong, and tonight that oath had spoken louder than fists or threats. The bar door creaked open and the older veteran from the night before stepped in. He carried no phone, no camera crew, only a quiet nod of respect. "You handled it like a Marine," he said simply. "You didn't flinch." His words were enough. Janelle returned the nod, her composure intact, though her eyes softened with gratitude. One by one, others trickled in, locals, veterans, ordinary customers, each offering the same silent acknowledgement. Solidarity had replaced fear. Outside, journalists still lingered, but Janelle did not chase them away. She poured herself a glass of water, leaned on the counter, and spoke to the room with the same calm that had carried her through the storm. "They thought they could tear down what I built here," she said, her voice steady. "But they only reminded us of what can never be torn away: dignity, honor, and the truth we carry." Phones recorded again, But this time her words weren't just evidence. They were testimony. As evening fell once more, the bar filled with a new kind of energy. Not the rowdy din of unchecked laughter, but a hum of resilience, a chorus of voices remembering the night when arrogance met accountability. The officers who had strutted in as predators were now subjects of investigation, their careers crumbling under the weight of national scrutiny. But Janelle did not celebrate their downfall. She knew justice was not about vengeance. It was about exposing what hides in shadows, about holding power accountable so others would not suffer the same. Before closing, she stood again at the mirror, the tattoo reflected in the dim light. "They thought I was just a bar owner," she whispered. "But Marines don't quit. We don't surrender. And we don't let injustice win." Her voice was quiet, but the lesson was loud enough to echo far beyond the walls of the river's edge. For those who watched, the story became more than a viral video. It became a reminder. Respect must be earned, power must be checked, and dignity, etched in sacrifice, can outlast fear.